Hi, I'm David.
Hi, I'm Yelena.
Welcome to our tutorial on Janu Sirsasana A. Janu is knee and Sirsha is head, so it's knee head pose. But the funny thing is we bring our chin to our shin, so I don't know. I guess it used to be done a little differently, but that's a different tutorial. So before we get started, just wanted to say we're happy to have you here, and if you're happy to be here, maybe you could like it. And if you have anything to say, let us know if you want to see a certain video, and please make sure to subscribe. Okay, so this is really actually the secret to Janu Sirsasana A, because let's face it, all of the practice up to Janu Sirsasana A, pretty challenging, jumping around, you're getting all hot, and then you get to Janu Sirsasana A. How do you feel? You're happy, right? Why are you happy? Because it's easy. Well, if it's easy, I don't think you're doing it right. Okay? There's a bunch of secret teachings, technique inside of Janu Sirsasana A that's going to make it harder, but it's also going to make it much more effective. Yeah. So it's really going to target the hips and especially a certain part of your hip that you need to change for deeper postures coming up later on in the pose.
But if you're like me, I actually like the fact that there's work in it, because at some point it was kind of a pose that I did and I was like, well, what am I doing here? But the work that's involved is this really nice stretching that's happening both inside and outside of your hip, and I find it enjoyable.
And for a lot of you, this is going to be a radically different way of doing this posture, and it might even be a little bit different than what you've been shown before. But I guarantee you it fits within the coordinates of traditional Ashtanga, because that's what we teach. Okay, so the thing that you need to start with, the knowledge, is of Dandasana, staff position. This is Dandasana. You just did it a little bit before in the sequence. And your hips are in line, obviously. Your legs are extended. And your arms are down beside you. Now, every posture in primary series, in a way, is built on Dandasana. And when we're doing Janu Sirsasana A, this is what's going to change it a lot for you, is I want you to try to hold on to your Dandasana hips as you bring your leg back into the Janu Sirsasana A position. Janu Sirsasana A, the heel is coming as high as you can up the inner thigh of the extended leg, eventually right up into the pelvic floor, if you can get it there. Hard to do. But when you're pulling it up there, don't let it change your hip. So don't hike that right hip back as you bring the leg back. Why are you doing that? Because it's easier. It's easier to bring the hip back to bring the leg back, right? But if you keep the hip fixed, it all comes from the external rotation that's happening in the femur to get the knee back. Now, here's what everyone says when I tell them to do it this way. But I've been told that my knee should be out at 90 degrees. Well, 90 degrees measured where? That's what I always answer back, because are we looking at the outside of the thigh, the inside of the shin, or are we just looking at the kneecap? And if you look at the knee is pointing at 95 degrees relative to the left leg. Okay, so just take that piece in, because we are following the coordinates here of the tradition, 90 degrees for Janu Sirsasana A, but we're getting 90 only through the kneecap, pointing out to the side, not by pulling the thigh all the way back. And this is going to create a very different effect in the hip now. Okay, so as you go forward, I want you to slightly engage this right leg by flexing your right foot, pressing the outer edge of the foot down into the mat, and think about rolling your right hip bone slightly forward. Do you see how Yelena just did that? By activating the thigh, getting a little bit of inward rotation there, you can see that the whole hip bone moved forward. And here, the glute medius and underneath the piriformis are all engaged now. And they're shortening as they contract and engage, but then they're also being lengthened over the hip as she goes forward. And then she's very active on the inside of the hip, and she's feeling much more work here in the outside of the hip, which is, piriformis is kind of magic. It's an external rotator, but it's also an internal rotator once the torso starts to come closer to the legs in hip flexion.
One more thing to keep in mind, again, David mentioned, when we start this pose, the foundation is Dandasana. So notice that your heels are coming together towards the center line of your body. They're in line with your pubic bone. So when we bring this leg back, this leg doesn't change. So it's actually tapering in a little bit. I'm not trying to have the heel in line with my hip because that would bring my leg out. Why? Well, because as I start going forward, if I'm thinking about bringing my chin on the inside of the shin, it's going to make me tip over towards that extended leg, and then that's going to add a curve in my back. Here. So
really, it's the same thing too, because if you pulled your hip back when you were pulling the leg out, that would also open up the gap, right? So watch, can you turn around so we can see your back when you're doing it? Watch when Jelena pulls the hip back, or like she is saying, brings the extended leg out to the side. Look at the unevenness that we get in the back. See, the right side of her back is lifted right now. There's a curve going this way. The left side is shortening. And then if we hold the hips in line instead, the Dandasana line, and bring the leg back, look at the shape of her back. It's even. The stretch, the work, I guess the tension in the body is evenly distributed. Okay? So as a teacher, it becomes really obvious, right? If you can see your students doing this, if you're a teacher, watch their back in those two different versions.
And again, so the importance of this is that it brings us back towards the center point in our body. And so the work then feels way more even, as opposed to kind of doing this half stretch,
slight curve,
and it just doesn't feel really balanced, nor does it serve any purpose, especially if you start to see what's coming up next in your practice.
And we are going to look at that in another tutorial down the road, Janu Sirsasana B, and you'll see the connection. A goes to B. Okay.
So give it a try and then comment and let us know how it felt for you to do it maybe this new way.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the new videos that will be coming up.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us.
See you soon.